Hi, this is Annie Banerjee, and I practice immigration law, mostly business immigration law, for the last 22 or so years. And today I'm going to talk to you about what is happening in the I-485, employment-based I-485 adjudication in the local offices. As most of you know, there were no interviews for employment-based cases at the local offices until recently. There is no reason for an interview at the I-485 stage for employment-based immigration, and that is because once you come into that stage where you are where you get to file your I-485, which is the last stage, which is the adjustment of status, the reason for how you're adjusting status has already been adjudicated, i.e. the I-140 or the PERM, or actually both. The I-140, especially the I-140, has already been adjudicated before the I-485 is adjudicated. The only thing left to be adjudicated during the I-485 interview is just status, because it's called adjustment of status, and if there is status, then you can adjust that status to become a green card resident. That means that they are supposed to be seeing whether you have status, legal status, to adjust that status. And that's the only issue at I-485. When the Trump administration started the employment-based immigration interview, it was actually just another ploy to get to have to get the immigration, to just deter immigration, or just put up a hindrance on immigration, because whether this person has status or not can easily be adjudicated at the service center during the time when there is the I-140 adjudication, or even afterwards. The whole adjudication can be done at the service center much easier than it can be done at a local at a local district office or field office by an actual interviewer. But at the time when this program first started, 2 or 3 years ago, the officers knew what they were doing. They asked the pertinent questions, because the only questions that can be asked at a I-485 employment-based issue is whether the person has status. But I just came back from an interview with a client in the Houston district office, and some of the questions that were asked of my client is clearly CIS, Citizenship and Immigration Service, CIS, overstepping its bound. Before I start, let me say why this is not good. The reason we have laws is because we as citizens want to be governed by those laws, and if we don't like those laws, we have the courts to go to challenge those laws. But we cannot have a CIS adjudicating by itself, ultra virus, like by itself, putting up its law and doing everything. And that is basically what is happening at the Trump CIS. I will also tell you that the other agencies, in my opinion, Customs and Border Patrol and ICE, in Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they are actually following the law much better than CIS is doing, Citizenship and Immigration Law is doing. That agency has actually overstepped its bound way more than any other federal agencies. For instance, when I went to the Houston district office with my client, the first thing the officer asked my client is, what type of a job do you do, and describe your job. That is the function of the Department of Labor when they ask, and the CIS, when service center in the I-140 stage, when they ask, what is this job, and do you have the means to follow it? Those things had already been adjudicated. The district officers do not know about job. I will tell you, my client was a chiropractor, and the district officer didn't even have any idea of what a chiropractor is. The officer asked my client whether he has a PhD, and my client had to explain that chiropractors have doctorate in chiropractic. chiropractic. Then he asked for the job description, but this is the thing, the officer does not have the ability to adjudicate whether this job is actually the job he is doing, because CIS field officers do not know about these jobs enough to even ascertain whether this person is actually doing the job or not. Number 2, he was asked to give pay stubs and employment letters. And those are things that usually are asked by family-based cases for an affidavit of support. Because in a family-based case, the beneficiary is being supported by the petitioner, who is the family member, and they need to see whether that beneficiary, whether that sponsor has a job or not and can support the beneficiary. But this is an employment-based case, and the sponsor is still supporting the beneficiary, but the sponsor is the U.S. company. It is an institution, it is not a person. And whether this employee, the employee that is employed by this employer or not, is not within the purview of the law. The law says for permanent residency is whether the employer is going to employ the employee once the employee gets the green card, as the employer has promised to the Department of Labor and to the CIS. It is for future employment, not for present employment. And if it is for future employment, why is the officer asking for current pay stubs? They should not. Number 2, letter of employment. Well, the CIS had taken care of that when they introduced the I-485J form. That form basically is signed by the employer and states that this is the job, and yes, once he gets his green card, we are going to employ him, and that is it. Okay, so you do not need another employer letter. So basically, the only thing you need for an I-485 employment-based adjudication is whether from the time you first entered the United States, you had maintained status or not. And unfortunately, CIS, my client was also asked whether the employer is related to the employee. Good question, but that's already been determined by the Department of Labor. That's not within the purview of CIS. And Department of Labor should question that, and they do question that, and they have already adjudicated it. And I don't see why CIS should overstep its bound and ask these questions. Now, everything was positive, and there is nothing wrong with my client's case, but this is where CIS has no right to ask these things. And why are they still asking it? We all have to ultimately live under the written letter of the law. The legislature makes the law. The CIS and the agencies executes the law. They have to execute the law, and the law does not say that in the I-485 interview you have to be asked about your job descriptions, about your employer, or anything like that. The employer has already filed the I-485. If the CIS wants to have anything to do with that, they can go and ask the employer. And it is the employer's burden. The employer has already filed the I-485J to say that they are going to hire him. CIS should not be asking for any of those documents. Having said that, what can we do? CIS is also the only agency that has stopped talking with American Immigration Lawyers Association liaison. The CBP, the ICE, the Department of Labor, they are all still talking to us lawyers, but CIS has deemed that they will not talk to the lawyers, and they have also started acting ultra vires, usurping power, in an effort to deny immigration services to folks that the law says should be given the immigration. And that is simply wrong. That is just Stephen Miller saying that immigration is wrong, and that's that. That's just Stephen Miller having white supremacy. And that is not the law of this country. Please fight. I know that as if you are an immigrant yourself, you don't want to jeopardize your time. You would rather give them your pay stubs and an employment letter, useless one, for I-485J, but you would rather give it to them than have them deny you. But the problem is that if we don't fight the CIS, then we are giving in to a government that is not democratic. And if we value democracy in the United States, if we do not like dictators like Cuba or North Korea, then we should fight and ask the CIS to stop this, because CIS is actually working to just adjudicate the law. They are not creating laws. They should not be creating laws. They cannot adjudicate information already adjudicated by another agency. Thank you.